Come to order, please. This is the work session for City of Bel Air Beach, November 18th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Robin Aki. Here. Councilmember Marv Beam.
Here.
Councilmember Dave Gaddis.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Shirley. Here. Councilmember Rita Swope.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glenn Gunn.
Here.
Mayor Joseph Manzo.
Here.
City Manager Lynn Reeves.
Here. Okay, thank you. All right, this is a work session, ladies and gentlemen. I see some new faces who may not be familiar with the rules. Essentially, a work session is where, because under Florida law, we're not able to discuss things privately on council. This is our opportunity to discuss items that we may be considering in the future. Typically, the rules say that there is no public participation here because we're not voting on things. However, with the approval of the board, we do allow a lot of times the public to make comments. So at the appropriate time, I'll ask for public comments, I'll ask for the board if they wish to permit those comments. Usually we do. With that said, should you decide to make a comment or you decide to stay, there's rules of conduct on that table on to my right side, right by the exit doors. They're also posted up here at the podium. Please review them, please understand them. That's the rules that we operate under. They're not complete, but they give you a nice summary of what is expected. So if you follow that, we'll all get along here. Things are a little less formal on a work session, so you may hear us depart sometimes with the formalities, with the Mr. and Mrs. stuff, but understand that we still operate under Robert's Rules of Order, okay? So with that, the first item that is up for discussion tonight is the workshop with the Finance and Advisory Committee members. And before we call the Finance and Committee members forward, we had on our chairs and actually in our packet, something that someone had prepared, and I know the city manager had asked for comments on it, I believe, as of Thursday afternoon, that says Finance and Advisory Ad Hoc Committee, and it has a bunch of information on here, 9 points of what the charge should be. And I'm just wondering where this came from, and just see if we have to have discussion on this first. So before we start imparting information to the Finance Committee, I want to make sure that we're straight, because I had some issues with this. So I don't know who authored this, but it looks like Glenn to me.
Yeah, I had my fingerprints all over it, and I shared this with the city manager, and that was basically the avenue I used for review and comment by the other council members. So, as late as today, I asked if they'd got any feedback on that, and the answer was no.
And I had let the clerk know that I was going to make my comments tonight, because I think they just didn't lend themselves to writing as well as they do to speaking. So the comments I'll make then, well, first I have a question, but we'll get to that later. Item number 3 is to recommend an appropriate amount for a city reserve fund. I would like to add to that and say, and provide investment alternatives and best practices. I know right now that there's alternatives to the way we're investing, having been to the Florida League of Cities meeting, and I just want to make sure that that gets addressed. On item 5, I would like to, it says recommend ways to better leverage the existing city assets of City Hall and the Marina. I think we should just say /city assets, but what I really have in mind is this building that was our temporary headquarters, what we affectionately call the White House. I'm not so sure that that shouldn't be looked at very hard in terms of what can be done with it.
So are you good to go with both of them? Because from my standpoint, one of the biggest assets we have that's has a lot of potential is a parking lot.
Oh yeah, no, the other two are fine, but I just say add the White House to it, or call, just say other city assets, that's fine. So in other words, it would read, recommend ways to better leverage the existing city assets of City Hall, the Marina, and other city assets, or the White House. I think that's the one that we're talking about, so that's all I'm saying, add to it. No, it's fine the way it's written. Now, I do have a question here. It talks about the city manager and the city treasurer being advisors to this group, and before I go off onto what I want to say, let me at least find out what you mean by advisors, because that is not something we ever discussed during our meetings over here.
Well, I think they're essentially non-voting members of the committee. However, I I'm kind of looking forward to thinking that there are going to be questions that are going to be asked by the committee, that if you have a representative sitting there right at a time, we can get a response and an answer to it, rather than have to break or wait till the next session.
Yeah, I would agree with that, with the exception of members of the committee. I think I took great pains when crafting this committee to make sure that, basically the council did not join this committee, and I said I wanted this committee to basically work independently. And I think, this is not a reflection on this city manager, but we're going to be looking at the city manager and this city's work. There's a vested interest here. So I want to keep it as independent as possible. I like the idea that he's the go-to guy. I don't want these folks wandering the halls and pulling, ledgers or anything like that. No one's, that's not what's being suggested. But I don't think he's on the committee. I don't think we ever discussed him being on the committee. And if he's going to be on the committee, then I want to take another look at the committee, because I want to be on the committee then, or have other people on the committee. I don't want that influence. This has to be an independent committee. And in essence, it's not a referendum on him so much as the practices that have been followed in the city for a long time. So I just want to make sure that there's now inappropriate influence in terms of anyone on the committee trying to steer it in any direction. I want the committee to do that work, and then he certainly has his input like anyone else. Same thing with the treasurer.
Excuse me, but I'm reading this that it's 6 residents period on the committee.
Right.
We have 2 consultants who can answer questions for them, period. We're not suggesting that anyone else be on the committee.
Okay, but Glenn just said on the committee, so that's what I want to clarify. Advisor, information,
That's not
sit
what
there,
this says,
fine.
though.
Well, we just need to look at it prima facie. The way it's written is, there are 6 residents who comprise the membership of the committee.
Okay.
The city manager and the city treasurer shall be advisors. In other words, they are non-voting members. They are not really participants in the committee. They are there to answer questions that the committee may have.
I'm just saying they're not members at all. They're not, they're there, they're information sources for these folks, but they're not members of the committee. I want to make that distinction.
Okay.
We didn't discuss putting the city, we never once mentioned the city manager being on this committee, never once during any of our discussions.
So what's the consensus of the council?
I would say add another section and move the city manager out of membership, yet still make him available as an advisor. Because who else is going to know how the money is being spent?
Dave, I agree with what you just said. That satisfies me if we do that.
I'd say put it under the last section of support. Maybe
That's good.
that sentence, city manager and city treasurer shall be advisors, and put that under the support section.
That's acceptable to me. I also want to just clarify that it says the city manager will serve as the hub for cross-pollination and sharing of information. There's nothing stopping anyone from this group from picking up the telephone and talking to somebody in the planning and zoning board project. Okay, they don't need to go through the city manager, so that's something that they can do if they find that useful, but they don't have to do it. Any one of them, as long as they're not violating public meetings law, so as long as it's, let's say, the chairman of the one group speaking to the chairman, or a member speaking to a member, there's no issue. They don't need to go through anyone, so just want to make sure they're aware of that.
That statement was put in there because it basically aligned with them participating as an advisor on these committees. You've got the finance committee, you've got the planning and zoning board, and you've got the charter review. The finance committee is just one cog in this big machine going on right now. And the central focus of all of those was the city manager, because he's an advisor kind of to all of these things. So rather than sit there and compartmentalize this thing, why not share knowledge back and forth? If he is sitting on one of these other things and a question comes up and says, why don't we do this? It's like, well, why should we duplicate the effort of this other committee? Because I know this committee is working on this. So that's the vein in which that was written.
And that's fine. That's fine, as long as it's not a requirement for them. They do not report to anyone but this council. I want to make that clear.
That's clear.
Okay.
We have there's an agenda here, and I'm not quite clear what it is. It seems like we're compartmentalizing this thing more and more instead of sharing information and making sure that the product is basically a concerted effort of all of these things. And instead, we're trying to compartmentalize it and focus it all to this council. Well, let's all work together here, and instead of trying to compartmentalize this thing for whatever reasons, I'm not clear.
Not trying to compartmentalize anything. I want groups to work together. They don't, it's their option if they want to go through it. He's not a designated hub. I didn't vote for that. I didn't say that was the intent of this thing. I don't want it to be the intent of this thing. I certainly have had issues with the city manager. I'm not going to go through them all, but I don't want him the hub of anything for this. He can be asked all the questions that the group chooses to ask him. They can take it at what they want, but if they want to pick up the telephone and call up the planning group or contact anyone on contact the council, they're free to do that. I just don't see that we need to formalize that, here's a reporting structure. It's not a reporting structure. It's an option to them. That's the way I see it. So. My only other comment on this is June of 2020 for a timeline is going to be too late. We have to have our finish, if anything that the Finance Committee does affects the charter, if anything is going to go on the November ballot, I believe August 11th, if I'm not mistaken, I can check it, August 11th I think was our due date for having the final written language in the Board of Elections office. I just don't think June, given the fact that we're smack in the middle of the budget season usually then, is going to give this council and the city attorney enough time to draft anything that's going to be necessary. So I think this just has to be really accelerated. Or if we decide we don't want to hit that presidential election, that's fine too. We just give them extra time and then we just move this to the next city election, which would be the 2021 elections, or we hold a special election. So.
That was a consideration. However, you have to back up and say the primary purpose of this group is reviewing the financial process, and that date dovetails with the budget process. So that date is being driven by the commencement of the budget process, and the spin-off, the secondary purpose of the thing is to come up with things for the charter review. So if you look at the laundry list of things we're asking from them, we need to ask ourselves, is that something we really need to accelerate, or do we want to say, hey, the primary purpose of this committee is to answer these 9 questions and give us some direction with the budget process. And, oh, by the way, while you're at it, give us some input for the charter.
I would agree. I don't think they have that much that's going to affect the charter. They may get something. Maybe the direction that we give them tonight would be, if you see something that's coming up for the charter, and I just checked my notes, it is August 11th is the absolute deadline date for having the referendum to the Board of Elections. And that means finished. It doesn't mean that it's our first draft. So if you have anything that you think is going to hit the charter, then maybe accelerate that, okay, keeping in mind that, yes, the overall goal is to be ready for the next budget season. So I think to the extent that they see something that might affect the charter, give that thing top priority and move it forward.
So is that still a good date, or do you want to change?
I think it is with that proviso, and we don't have to necessarily change it, Glenn. We can just give that information to them right now. I mean, I'm seeing Mr. Hansick here and other individuals, so give them that information. But just that's a call they have to make. If they see a charter issue coming up, accelerate that, because we don't really have much latitude on that. The cost to do a special election is not something I'd rather undertake if I could avoid it. Did anyone else on council have any questions on this or comments?
The only comment I would have is the only thing that they won't see, possibly, unless the city manager gives them a list of things we pulled out of the budget and our various wish lists that we put together. And I'd like to see that included so they see exactly what was eliminated and brought back, so they understand the whole process.
Thinking how we can do that, I remember, maybe Lynn can tell us, but as I remember, Lynn, when we cut something out of the budget or changed something, added something, whatever, you would usually come back to us the next budget meeting with a little summary and say, okay, I have the following, usually it was written summary saying the following changes were made. So can we give them that information and just show them?
That's fine.
Because I think that would show them what we took out and what we were thinking.
That's fine.
You have that information available?
Not right now.
No, but
Yeah.
at the meeting. Okay. Is that sufficient, Mark?
Well, I think they need to know just where we're going, what we're doing, what the intentions of the city council was. They wouldn't know that any other way. And Glenn, maybe if, during your presentation, you could maybe get that information or gather it to see where we looked at all the deficiencies and the things that we want to correct in the future, to give them an idea of where this budget is and why it was done the way it was done.
Well, along the lines of the first item we discussed, the participation as advisors by the city manager and the city treasurer, let me back up, and maybe what we should do is put that question to the committee themselves, let them start up, and if they see a value add or a positive impact by inviting these people on a routine basis to attend their meetings, then let them come forward and say, hey, we really would like to have the city manager and treasurer sitting on these meetings as advisors, because we're wasting a lot of time researching information or looking for answers.
Anybody else have comments on this? So we're going to call the finance committee up then. We're ready, council, to give them the idea of what this committee's all about? Not hearing a lot of yeses. Yes? Yes, okay. All right, finance committee? Now we're ready for you, Mr. Hanzig. Any place you'd like. Rob. This reminds me of like the impeachment hearings or something. Nothing will happen, don't worry.
About the reporters.
Just for the record, if you don't mind, starting with Mr. Hanzig, maybe if we can just have everyone just give their information and name. Just your name is what we really need, so everyone knows who everyone is.
John Hanzik. Ron Saganik.
Welcome, thank you. The reason why we had you here tonight, and we know two people are traveling right now, so Ms. Hollis and Rick Schock are traveling, so they're actually out of, both of them are out of the country, so they can't be here, so they're certainly excused tonight. So the whole purpose of tonight is to just give you an idea of what this meeting was all, what this group is all about, just from the way we saw it, because as I did say, my intent is to give you this information, and I'm here for you if you have a question, if you want me to attend. I may attend some meetings, but I'm probably not going to attend all of them. I have gotten a lot of it, but I'll go first here. I've gotten a lot of information, just, and Glenn Gunn attended the same thing I did. When you go to the Florida League of Cities, you go to their meeting, you get a lot of information. So one of the things I was talking about was investments. There's, right now, our city does what's supposed to be like a ladder system for investing our excess funds. It's not a ladder, and it's not really being done real well. It may have its limits, and again, this is something to look at what we have, but other cities' best practices up and down this coast use other investment vehicles, which are safe, equally safe. Some of them, one of them in particular, and I'm not endorsing any of them, is on the board of directors as one of the top people in Pinellas County, okay? So it's in the Pinellas County government. Other groups invest their money that way. Another example I will give you is with the reserves, okay? We have over $1 million, we have $1 million in a hurricane reserve. We have other reserves. Other cities don't keep them segregated, they put them together. I've got that from speaking with other mayors. So to the extent you want that information, I'll be more than happy to give you detail on it or introduce you to those mayors that told me that information. You can speak directly with them and see how they do it. That's kind of an example of what I'm looking for from this group. Is there a better way to do what we're doing right now? This isn't about going through and saying, oh, somebody did something wrong, okay? We've been investing this money like this for, I don't even know how long, probably decades. Maybe there's a better way. No, we can't go and start playing the market, and we can't go and do hedge funds and stuff like that. We can't do that. It has to be a very conservative, limited investment with limited risk. But there may be other options. There's other options that other cities are certainly using, so look at that. Is there a way we can save money on our operations? And that really means taking a look at every facet of our operations. The big stuff, I think some of it we've already looked at pretty hard. We looked really carefully at salaries last year. There's been changes in terms of salaries. I don't think there's much more there that you could probably find, but you certainly should take a look at it. Take a look what other cities do and how they run their city. Take a look at this building and take a look at the operational costs for it and decide, does this make sense for us to do? Are we maximizing our return on this building, as Glenn said before? What is the right reserve fund? I heard, we need $1 million for a hurricane. Do we need $1 million for a hurricane? I don't know. Do the other cities have that? Maybe we need 2 million. Maybe we need $500,000. I don't know. These are the questions to be answered. And basically, take a look at any way of saving money. We can't go through every little tiny thing. It's not a matter of you going out and saying, wow, we got a guy who could, exterminate the bugs for $20 cheaper. That's not what we're looking for. Look at the big dollars for the way I see it. Look at the big stuff, don't worry about the small stuff. We have underutilized assets, probably no question about the marina being an underutilized asset. One of the things we charged the planning board with was coming up with, seeing what the zoning would be on this stuff and what other options are available to us. I have no idea what options are available to us. We want to stay within our, and before anybody misquotes anything, we want to stay within our city limits, okay? Don't come back and tell us we could build a 20-story, apartment building there, because it's not going to happen, okay? It's going to stay within the existing planning of the city right now, within the existing zoning of our city. But just because it's zoned governmental doesn't mean it can't change. Doesn't mean you can't do something else with it. The idea was floated before about, is this building necessary for us? Can you put an alternative building at the marina parking lot? Maybe. You have this thing called the White House here. I don't know, I think we store equipment in it. It's a very expensive piece of real estate to store equipment in. So what can we do with that? Can we do anything with it? Those are the options to kind of look at and advise us and let us know. And you're doing the legwork, the homework, and really looking at all the details and what the best practices are in other cities. Look at similarly situated cities. One of my favorite always is Bel Air Bluffs. They're actually slightly bigger than us, but they're extremely well run. I admire them a lot, and we've adopted several of their policies lately. So take a look at it. Does it make sense for us? It may or may not be the situation. That's the way I see it. You're unlimited as to where you can go. I think it is a good idea to work with everyone in this city and get your information, but each of you have tremendous talent financially, and I know that you're going to be independent in your thought and really, search for the best answer, not listen to what everyone tells you. Thank you for all the work that you're putting on this. I really appreciate it. You're next. Mr. Dean?
Shirley brought up a good point. This was a while back, I don't know if you remember, this had to do with the $1 million we had in Hurricane Fund.
Got that on my list of things to talk about.
Would you want to elaborate on that? Because I've been thinking about it ever since you said it, but we never went any further.
This is probably right up Ron's alley. We talked about just floating ideas, taking that $1 million we just have sitting in the hurricane fund, the rainy day fund, and maybe utilizing that money, but putting in place a line of credit in case we have an emergency event where we need money quickly. So that's an option there. And just since I've got the mic, let me go ahead and finish. We have been researching some other funding sources, maybe having a stormwater fee, things like that. It's a process to make that happen, but to generate fees that are specific to their use. We have a huge budget for stormwater repairs and deferred maintenance, and we're trying to figure out how to pay for it. We have some money in reserves, but it will by no means finish the strategic plan or the master plan that's been in place for a few years. So we're looking at that, and I can, speak to that more, maybe in a committee meeting or something. And then there was several times they mentioned the White House. If you guys aren't familiar, there's a little house on the next street over that we use for a maintenance facility. They've converted it. They gutted it and converted it for a maintenance facility. Lynn can tell you more about it, but it was. Address. What's the address over there, Lynn?
001C. 1001C. It's in the corner of the parking lot. There's
in the back, I thought it was that one.
Yeah, there's two buildings there. There's a garage and house that was bought.
Whenever we built this building, they used it for temporary office space, and now it's been just converted to maintenance facility. And it's in the residential neighborhood, which isn't desirable, in my opinion, but.
Guys, I'd like to add a little bit to that. I don't know if anybody on the committee has been here for 20 years, but at one time we had a garage for the police department, and we also had a service garage where all the equipment was in. Everything was moved around, and this building was built. The original design was to build this building up, but we have what we have. If we didn't have that building, those two buildings, we wouldn't be able to put any of the equipment in it anywhere. I don't know what the original intent was after I got off the council, to tell you what their thinking was. It possibly could have been outsource everything. I don't know, but it doesn't make any sense to outsource everything. And Lynn has proven that to us here over the last couple of years. So we really need that building. I wouldn't know where to put all the equipment. It would be outside, it would be destroyed, so I think we're stuck. If there's another idea that comes up, have at it.
Does this book contain what's in that?
I beg your pardon?
Does this book contain what's actually stored in there?
We'll get a list of assets from the city.
You can take your tour. No big deal.
How do we find out if we want to find out, more about the marina and what other ideas we could do to generate revenue? Is that something that we'll talk to Lynn about? Like, what are the boundaries? As you said, we can't go beyond the boundaries since we can't build a condo. But is there a framework that we can read to say, okay, in this scope, this is how creative we can be? Where do we go to get that kind of information?
Just as a piece of information, it's not even this council's decision as to what we do with a piece of property. If we're going to sell a piece of property, I'm not sure about if we repurpose it, but certainly when it comes to selling a property, it has to go before the voters. So it's something that we can agree on here at council and say it's what we think is the right thing to do for the city, but the voters ultimately have the say. So if we're going to sell the White House, voters have to decide that, okay? I'm not going to take up your time, but you said, is there an alternative? And I just want to throw out thinking beyond the box, okay? We got tennis courts in the back. I don't know how many Bel Air Beach residents get on it, but I know people from out of the city tell me how much they enjoy them. And we have a $20,000 bill to resurface them coming up. So if we're going to have tennis courts that we have to pay for that are being used, I don't know how many people in the city are using them, maybe everyone, but I know for a fact people are telling me, hey, we're from Largo, we love your tennis courts. Well, go love your own tennis courts, okay? And take down the tennis courts and put your storage building there. There's an option. I'm not saying it's what we should do, but there's an option for you.
But that's what I mean, like, where can we go and find out if we wanted to, for sake of argument, the tennis courts, we find out that we could repurpose them and we can make money for the city and do X, Y, and Z. But where can we find out if that's within the scope? Because like you said, we can't do anything. We can't just build the buildings where we don't want to be building. So how do we kind of not waste our time putting together a recommendation when you guys don't have the power to do that?
Do you mind if I add something?
Sure, go ahead, Jeff.
Basically, the way that I see this is you start with what's obvious, look over our existing budget, what we're spending money on now. At the same time, planning and zoning is going to be reviewing all the properties in question. Whenever they have that report, that's whenever you guys will kick in and say, oh, okay, I can do this because we can do something in this type of zoning.
And when will that be ready? Because this committee is only meeting for 120 days, is that right? So when will planning and zoning have their work done?
I'm going to speak about that later on because we have the same thing that Mr. Gunn put together for the Finance Committee, he put together for that Planning Committee. And the one issue that I had with it is it also has a June 2020 date, and that is way too late. That's going to have to happen earlier, so I'm going to ask that that be moved up. So I don't have an exact date, but we'll discuss that at the end of probably the last part here under general business. All I would say to all of you is, again, this is an incredible group in terms of your backgrounds and stuff. There's no idea that can't be floated. There's nothing that's going to be a bad idea. I mean, if it's not something that's, I floated an idea earlier tonight, the council didn't move on it, okay? Stuff like that can happen, so float the idea, if people like it, they'll move on it. If they don't move on it, no harm, no foul, okay? Bring it out. I'd rather the idea come out and everybody, no one's gonna pick on anyone in terms of shooting it down. So if they don't like it, or if your group doesn't like it, that's as far as it goes, you know? But I mean, we know certain things, obviously. You know, if you come back and say, I want to build a 20-story condominium, not going to happen, realistically.
I think what we're starting to see here is the questions being asked are underscoring the value of having the city manager as an advisor sitting in with the committee, so that when they start or ask questions, he's right there to say, you know, I just sat in with the planning and zoning board, and guess what? They're looking right at that thing, so maybe we shouldn't invest a lot of time in that one particular issue, and/or that's how the information gets cross-pollinated between these committees. Just like you said, these committees are running concurrently, and we need some crosstalk between them, because there are a lot of issues we don't need to be spending time on the same issues. I mean,
I think from an efficiency standpoint, that's real important too, just so that we keep everything moving.
And again, if
there's
you-
some timelines for everything,
Mhm.
mayor, so I think for all of us to stay
And
on.
again, if you get bogged down on something and you get off on a track, and the city manager sees that you're going on a track where, you know, you don't have to go, it's just a waste of time, so this will kind of focus you in a path to eliminate any time wasting.
I'm curious also if it's possible that maybe one or more meetings could be merged between the two committees to where people can freely talk.
maybe there's some issue that crosses all of them, and we say, hey, let's convene a meeting of everybody, so we can get all the information out there at one time.
Hey, that's a good idea. There's certainly nothing legally that would, you know, prescribe you from doing that, so maybe get the planning board involved with it, and or any other group for that matter. I mean, you know, and you're free. It says right now that you can come to council 5 to 10 minutes. You know, if you need more time, you need more time. We're going to give you the time. You're doing us a major service here. So if you need, you know, to deliver something to us, or you have questions on direction, you don't have to wait until the end. Not the way I see this, okay, to give us the report and ask us any directional questions. This is what these work sessions are all about. So, you know, it can be delivered at a work session, it can be delivered at a council meeting. Council meeting, we're supposed to have action items. Work sessions, we can discuss pretty much anything we want.
I'd like to add too that there's a differing level of detail required for the various issues that you're going to look at. Obviously, reviewing the budget and the line items that are going to require much more detail and a finer level of specificity. You're going to want to look at that much closer. But one of the benefits of this thing is you really have an opportunity for some unconstrained thoughts and brainstorming. Throw out some ideas. And it doesn't mean you have to invest a lot of detail and thinking and specifics and data behind it. I mean, some of them you're just going to throw out there, let us figure out how it can get done, or if it's a worthy possibility. So, you know, again, the financial end of this thing has the greatest level of specificity required, and some of the other things, hey, maybe it's just unconstrained thought, brainstorm idea. Hey, why don't we consider this? Well, yeah, we never thought of that. Let's figure it out if there's a way to do it.
Anyone else have anything
You
to?
never know what you might come up with that might all of a sudden turn a light on. So why didn't we think of this 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 2 days ago? And that's what this is all about. That's why we were discussing this for quite a while, is to get these committees organized so that could happen. So
Part of the problem, and I know, John, you were at all the budget, and I'm going to call on you as soon as I finish here. You were at all the budget meetings, and we get, as council members, a fairly thick packet of budget information, and not everyone up here is financially oriented. It's a lot to go through. There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of charts, there's a lot of changes, and it becomes overwhelming over here, and we get hit with it in a very condensed fashion, a very condensed period of time, and then all of a sudden, you know, we're being requested to give trim notices and preliminary information to the tax collector, and it's difficult. So this gives us a head start really for what next year is. We're locked into this year's budget. There's nothing we're going to do, and there's nothing we're going to change on it. So you're not changing that one. What you're doing is giving us the input for next year. I've said this one a lot, and I can't believe I forgot it, but we have been borrowing from the piggy bank. We've been borrowing to the tune of close to $400,000. Now, through some good work, and I'd like the Finance Committee to let me know how this good work happened, because I didn't get a detail on it, but Lynn Reeves saved about $309,000 on last year's budget, which is fantastic. I don't know where that came from, so I don't know if it's something I should expect next year or expect next year. I hope it's next year. But that's something that, it obviously makes a big difference, because if we're going to keep tapping the piggy bank, as I call it, for $400,000, I think the piggy bank was only going to last 3 or 4 more years, and then we were going to have to either stop with the bigger capital expenditure programs, or the alternative was there was going to be a pretty significant tax increase on your city portion of your tax bill. Now, we've been, you've been getting like $15, $20 increases in a year. This one would have been steep, okay? It would have been a huge increase. So that's what we would be looking at, basically. So bottom line is, let's see where this money's coming and let's see where it's going, because I think from a capital project standpoint, we don't really, I'll speak for myself, but I think it's the feeling of most people on this council. I don't think we want to cut back on the good work that we're doing in the community right now. We're fixing up a lot of good stuff, and I think we want to continue to the point that at least we get things where we feel it's pretty stable. Mr. Hanson, you had a question?
Yes. I'm looking at this first page here on the Finance and Budget ad hoc notes. And it says, based on the meeting dates and times, first meeting to be determined by council members and city manager, provide orientation, Q&A for the committee, subsequent meeting dates and times to be determined by the committee. We're kind of, unfortunately, already behind the 8 ball because 2 members aren't here. And one of the things we were supposed to do, according to this guidance, was elect the chair, secretary, whatever, presiding officer and all that sort of stuff. So out of fairness, I don't see how we could do that tonight.
Oh, you won't. I'm not thinking you're going to do that tonight. Yeah, this is an action. This is that introductory thing and saying good luck and giving you the blessing and sending you on your way, basically. After this, it's your meeting. You guys call it when you think is best. I would try and do it, the sooner the better, and elect your officers at that point in time. That's it.
How do you contact the other 2 members?
You can do everything through the city clerk or through the city manager. That's what Patty's not in, so Patty Gentry here will be your point person. We go through this all the time. It's not a sunshine violation, ask people when you're going to have a meeting, but just to keep everything square, someone get in contact with Patty, she'll put out something and, maybe get a couple of days and everyone can agree on it. And then you make your vote at that night. We're not going to get involved with it.
And we can, I know you're saying that this June cutoff is too close to deadlines the city has to meet for obvious reasons, but you did mention when the council approved this committee, and you said it again, if necessary, we could go beyond that 120 days, but not take it up to the threshold. I don't want to work under a stressful condition either, but for
no need to.
For the amount of work I think we're being tasked with, I don't see us getting it done in 120 days, to be quite honest. And I've already been through this. And the $64,000 question to me is, after receiving the mortgage note, if you will, on this building, would somebody please tell me how much money a year we're paying back? Because I've been through every page of this budget and I can't find it.
I know the debt service is $200,000 a year. How much is actually being paid back of that? You need to have the amortization schedule. When we get to one thing that you said, I think Glenn Gunn clarified it very well, and I agree with what he said. June, we can extend your deadline if you need more time, okay? Keep in mind, August 11th, that is the charter, that is when we have to deliver the wording to the Director of Elections. That is an immovable date if you want to make the presidential election. If you have anything that's charter specific, please have it to us well in advance of that, because we will not make that deadline. And it's okay if we miss that deadline. I mean, it's an aspirational deadline. I'm doing it because it doesn't really cost us anything special to do a special election. We can have a special election in December, but that's coming out of the city's pockets. We can wait until next March when we have the next council election, that would be March of 2021. That's fine, okay? But this is an easy one, and I think you get the most bang for your buck, because let's face it, it's a presidential election, and people who never vote usually go out for the presidential election. So that's my only thought, but it is not a drop-dead deadline, and I don't want anybody to be, working until midnight to try and make any of this happen. So if you think you need more time, just keep us apprised as to what's the situation, so.
That's also on us. I mean, during your 5 or 10 minute status briefings at each council session, we can prod them a little bit and say, hey, have you thought about any issues for the charter review committee? Or so that's on us too. We'll remind you of that.
Before I forget, you brought up that note. That note supposedly is not able to be paid back early.
I know.
Uh-huh.
I read this.
Yeah, I want to look into that as carefully as we can and look at possible options. It may say that on the paper, and that's true, okay, but that doesn't mean that we might not be able to make some other type of a deal. I've been in non-breakable leases that have been able to be broken, but you had to pay to get out of it. So I don't know what the interest rates are on there, I don't know what the terms are. Ron, I know you have a great background in this kind of stuff. Hey, go through this and tell us what the
I
options are.
talked to Adam when we were working on the undergrounding, so Adam Ward's the banker at SunTrust, and I called him and asked him specifically relating to this. There is a prepayment penalty, so there's a fee that can be paid. It just, and that's just will be part of our decision process. Does it make sense to?
It may be worth it to incur that.
To break it, or, we can hang out an investment reserve option to waive the fee. There's all kinds of things that we can negotiate.
Excellent.
Or 10.
You got it. I'm comfortable. Yeah. Did you have any other questions?
Rate is 3.72%.
3.72, that's not bad.
What did we do for the utility? 2?
3.65, and then there was a small portion that was in the number 4.
It might be good. That's what you'll tell us.
But even if we try to, from what I read, and Ron, tell me if I'm wrong, what I read today on that contract, even if we try to refinance it, there's still a penalty. So, as I see it right now, we got 2 options. We pay it till it's done paying for it, or figure out if we can afford to pay it early and a penalty. But you're still gonna have to pay all the interest too. So it's
I think it'll be easy for us to get to a conclusion. I think it kind of goes back to what the planning and zoning, and is there anything we're gonna do? Maybe an asset, if you're gonna liquidate some assets, and maybe it makes sense. So I think we can work through it.
Anyway, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I envisioned when I thought about this a long time ago, so you guys got it.
Now, Ron, maybe you can twist another banker's arm and see if.
They tried to hire 15 years ago.
But
This is the NAFTA of mortgages.
if we could get them to the city council meeting and pinpoint, pin them down here in the public forum, maybe they would squirm a little bit, no?
I don't know, those bankers don't care a thing about what city council has to say.
It's beyond his control. He has no words.
You're the worst.
Anybody else on council? Anyone else on the committee?
Well, we appreciate some guidance and some thoughts, but we'll keep them coming if you guys know things. I think it sounds like there's some fees that can be charged, there's some grants to look at for other revenue generating, and what can we do to generate additional revenue, manage expenses?
We don't make much with grants, Ron, and we were just at the Big C meeting in Palm Harbor, was celebrating, I think it was Palm Harbor, one of the communities. They got their undergrounding paid for by Uncle Sam. Our guys are paying for it by themselves. So, well, I guess that's the question I have. I have the newspaper clip out. It didn't really say how they got it, but they got a federal grant for it. And, I guess when I see that, I say, well, why can't we? I don't know. Maybe we're not eligible. Maybe it only hit certain sized communities. I have no idea, but 8.9 million or something? It was quite a bit of money. Yeah, I read it at the last meeting, so I have it, but it was they got something, and quite a bit, actually, so there was
Maybe
very,
we can still go for that and
absolutely,
get everybody back.
that would be nice.
Good idea, right around, we can have a celebration.
I'd like to think, probably because we don't have enough voting, we don't have enough votes, they're probably getting some favors called in from their local, representatives or something that, we don't tap into that right now.
That segues us into number 2, which is the legislative priorities. Some of these people actually lobby to get this grant money, and that may be worthwhile.
And that's maybe what's, we can go through, right?
I found out by accident when we were in the meeting in the summertime from Florida League of Cities. They were adversarial to me on a case. They're not any longer, but that law firm happens to be like the biggest lobbyist in Florida for getting grant money. I know who these people are. I know how to contact them. Obviously, it's no longer a conflict of interest for me to do so, but it's something that our city could certainly, if we wanted to engage their services, we could certainly speak with them, or I can get you in touch with these people. That's what they do, and apparently they're quite successful. So I'm not endorsing them. I'm just giving you information. So.
I don't know if this is the right form to ask, that would be taking up a lot of your time.
It's okay.
But we could get a grant for the beautification of all those trees, right? How do we find out details of how we got that grant and how we qualified, just to see what else is out there under that one? Is that something we talked to Lynn about?
You can, yeah, any grant applications. I mean, he's done some. We have one pending for the park right now behind us. We tried for some, but, I just do believe that there's other money out there. That's what I've been told by other mayors. I've been told this by other mayors of cities of our size. But you gotta look for it. And sometimes you have to break your own ideas, okay? Certain things are on development and certain things are, so if we're gonna be, and I'm not saying we should change, but if you want someone's money, it comes with strings attached. So they don't give you the money just because you want to be a residential community. If that's what you're going for, you won't be getting it. You may have to make certain concessions. It may be totally against what the citizens of the city want. That's fine, then we won't go with it. But let's at least know what our options are. I'm the kind of person that would rather say, here's the option. I don't mind if the city hall is filled with people and say, this isn't what we want. Okay, then we won't do it. But at least we let you know that the option is out there, and your alternative will be pay higher taxes. I mean, there's no other way of funding these projects unless you pay taxes or special assessments like the folks in Belle Isle are doing. So. I saw a hand. Did you want to speak? Council, will we have any objection to citizens speaking in this portion? I see no objection.
Jim Vanscoy, Beller Beach. I was just wondering if this committee has received a copy of the strategic plan.
John's nodding yes. I'm not sure what was in their book, but it looks like
2019, 2024.
That's it.
And just a suggestion, I was looking at different grants and stuff for the park board, and there's the Department of Environmental Regulations, Department of Natural Resources, those kinds of things. As you start looking at those different state departments, they have a bunch of grants out there that you can research to see if we qualify for any of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other council comments? Any questions from the committee? You sure you still want to do this? I'm not hearing a lot of yeses. I'm just hearing laughing. Thank you, folks. I appreciate it. And you'll come back to our, December. You might not even have met, but you're welcome to the December meeting. If you want to be on the agenda, just let Addie know, and she can get you on the agenda. If not, I guess we'll expect to see you for January for your first presentation. But if you want to talk with us, you certainly have a spot reserved on every meeting, and whatever time you need, within reason. We don't want to do 2 hours.
All right, so is Patty going to be the contact to find out when the other two members are going to be available, so we can plan the meeting?
Yes, why don't we do this, since we have 3 of you here, okay?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know when you want to get together, but do you have an idea when you might want to get together?
If between us three, we can pick a date that works well with us, and then Patty will.
Can you pick a
ask
day
you-
and let Patty know tonight, maybe,
right.
while you're here? Because after this, you're subject to the sunshine rules, which in a nutshell basically say you can't pretty much talk outside of
Oh,
here.
thank you for mentioning that.
registering a meeting's not a problem, but don't do anything else, obviously. But if you want to pick it tonight, let her know, then she can put it out with the other individuals, and you can call your first meeting and get moving. And those are open to the public, and you know the routine from there. Right?
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, next is item 2, the discussion of legislative priorities. It's something I requested. I placed this on the last agenda, and my mistake. I know we're not supposed to, now I know we're not supposed to have the discussion items anymore. So this was a discussion item. I had provided everyone with a copy of the Suncoast League of Cities legislative priorities for the coming season. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Everyone had this thing at the council meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. The way I see this, I spent a fair amount of time with the Suncoast League of Cities, along with several other mayors, trying to get legislative priorities that I thought would be apropos to Bel Air Beach. They didn't show up here. None of them, not a single one. And to say that these are not Bel Air Beach's legislative priorities probably is a good statement, at least the way I see it. They're certainly not mine. And so I'm going to respectfully decline any invitations to go to Tallahassee on this agenda. I will go if we're looking at home rule issues where they bring up again the issue of trying to put B&Bs into our city and, you know, eliminate the grandfather clause for short-term rentals or anything else that directly affects Bel Air Beach. But I just don't think that most of the stuff that's on here is stuff that I want to spend my time. Now, with me saying that, it doesn't have to be the mayor who goes. Routinely, other council members attend Suncoast Leagues of Cities meetings. They go to Tallahassee, they lobby. And if anyone wants to go, just let me know, and I will set you up with the contact person who wants to go there. But, you know, politically, I'm just not going to go and advocate for some of the stuff that's just not, you know, something I truly believe in. And some of the stuff I don't think is good science. I don't buy it. And, you know, other people may differ. But if you want to go advocate, I will absolutely get you set up with Angela Christ. She's the person who's in charge of Suncoast locally. And I'll give you that number right now if you want it. And you can go up there. They do go up to Tallahassee. They have a short session where they basically go up for a day. They meet with the legislators. It's somewhat of a, you know, in and out kind of thing. You spend about, I guess, half an hour inside each legislator. And apparently it's a pretty good learning experience. Time is limited, and, you know, it's just something that personally it's not something I want to do at this point in time. But rest assured I will be watching. And I mentioned this last time, the Big C, we held a press conference with all the mayors not too long ago about this whole issue of the home rule, in particular with the short-term rental issue. It came up last year. It didn't make it too far, but the understanding is it may be coming up again. What you should know, and the takeaway is, our representative, Nicholas DeSigli, was totally in favor of that. So if it's up to Nicholas DeSigli, you will take the short-term rental law that we have on our books and just completely erase it. We will have no say any longer. And if you want to know how well that works out, go see Cookie Kennedy in Indian Rocks Beach and ask her, because they lost their grandfathering and it is a disaster. You have B&Bs operating next door to regular people's houses. You know, I use the term affectionately animal house, but it's animal house, parties all night, people coming down for the short term, not really the kind of people that I think most of us want to have living next door to us. So rest assured we'll be watching it, and if it happens, then I think I'm going to need the coordinated efforts of the community, and that is something the community should very much get behind. Don't do it for the mayor, okay? Don't do it for the mayor, do it for your city. My two neighbors aren't going to rent their houses. I'm not too worried about it. But other people should be worried about it. It's a serious problem. So that's where I'm coming from. If anyone has any discussion on it, I'll entertain it. Anyone?
So where do you want to go from here?
Basically, I'm just going to monitor it and let you know if I see something coming up. They give us, on a daily basis, we get what's happening in the legislature. This is a short session, basically. It's not the longer session. So I don't know if this thing's going to get any traction, but I'm going to try and monitor the bills that, you know, that matter to Bel Air Beach. And what can we do about it? I'm not so sure, Glenn, that there's a lot we can do about it, okay? You know, and my political affiliation aside, okay, there's a group of individuals up in Tallahassee that vote the party line, and it's not necessarily the home rule party line. They feel that they can control it better from Tallahassee. You heard, I think, a lot of this when you were at the meeting in the summertime. So that's what Florida League of Cities is doing, but when I saw these legislative priorities, I'm like, transportation isn't we're secondary corridor, Gulf Boulevard. So this is not something that I'm gonna get that excited about, or, septic tanks, which I don't even know if we have in our city. So, it's just something that I think we want to focus on what affects Bel Air Beach, at least I do. And I will keep you advised on it, and if we need to mobilize, then we're going to need to mobilize this city, okay? 5 people saying, hey, we're not going to vote for you, isn't going to get any attention. But if we get a whole city behind us saying, hey, listen, this isn't what we want, and if you pass this, don't count on us to be in your corner, maybe, and I'm saying maybe, we'll get some attention. I don't know. Okay, they're pretty set in their ways.
And one of the well-recognized issues for Bel Air Beach is we don't have political clout. I mean, when you look at our strength and weakness analysis, we don't have the political clout, we don't have economic clout, we don't have political clout. So my follow-on question is, when you look at the collaborative efforts of the Sunshine and the Big C stuff, are they gaining traction?
Well, if you look at Florida League of Cities, and we got this when we were in Orlando. Okay, this is the legislative summary of key votes, and pretty much everything that they said no, 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 the legislators said yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So this is the bigger organization. Suncoast kind of takes their walking, I wouldn't say that. Suncoast kind of gets their cue, if you will, from Florida League of Cities, and basically a lot of these people thumb their noses at it. I look at a person, and I'm going to say this, I know this is public, okay, and believe me, I voted for Nick Dinsigley, all right, but Jennifer Webb is a champion of home rule. Jennifer Webb is the Democrat represents St. Petersburg up to, I think, around maybe Treasure Island or Reddington Beach, Reddington Shores. She's fantastic. She's at every one of our meetings. She's there to listen to us. She goes out and says no to these folks, and Nick says yes. So, this is our representative. We put him in, and, I never thought I would ever advocate deviating from the party line, but I'm not happy with the way his votes have been. I'm really not, okay? He's never come to a single meeting, never. So you don't even have a chance to talk with him. So, we could go and see him, but if I go up and say I'm the mayor, and guess what? We don't like what you're doing, big deal, okay? Now, if I say I'm the mayor, and here's here's a petition signed by 500 of my people, maybe, maybe. Still don't know. And you're right, we don't have the political clout. Glenn, what we do have, though, the good thing on this is that the Big C is paying attention to that very issue, because we know that this is important for the ocean communities, the beach communities, so we're paying attention to that. And I'm sure these guys will, okay, but when I saw this, I was like, not really. Anyone else? Okay. So I will let you know, I will keep you advised as things are going on. Next, discussion on installing surveillance equipment, audio and video on the exterior of the community center and parking lot, requested by Councilmember Swope. Councilwoman?
Yes, I wanted to see if we could ask the city manager to look into the cost to install audio and video surveillance equipment on the exterior of the building covering the parking lot to help ensure our citizens some sense of security, as well as to avoid any type of issues for the building or the parking lot. So I would like to have the city manager look at least the cost of it.
We've done this once before, and we had to take it out of the budget because it was too expensive. Although we do have some extra money right now. The original proposal was to go and put cameras in the park lot as well as in and outside the building and the parking lot here on the west side.
What was the cost of it at that time, do you recall?
I can tell you that I know just to have surveillance at the entrances and the lobby hallway here was like $12,000 or something. It was pretty steep without going into the parking lot.
I think probably what drives that cost up is actually labor. I look at what equipment costs nowadays. It's not so bad whenever you add the cost of installation it just goes through the roof. I'm wondering if we have talent within the city that we could actually curb some of that cost and get this anyway. Not only in the parking lot, but I think it would be a good idea to cover all entrances in our service window there.
Absolutely.
Just because I think this is the time. There's more and more events happening. We're getting reports almost daily that something happens in public spaces. So definitely something that we should entertain.
Glenn and I are witness to something that happened, what, a year and a half ago at the service window. It could have been a dangerous situation. And it took way too long for the sheriff to get here. They were on other calls, and they got somebody in that was available, and it took 10 minutes or so. But it would take no time at all for someone to jump over that counter. And I think we should put some type of barrier out there. It doesn't have to be necessarily bulletproof, but prevent somebody from jumping over that counter. And as far as the cameras, I think we need them. I think we ought to start inside the building first. And I agree, Dave, with you. We could do a lot of the wiring ourselves. There's no big deal to run the wire. Then the company could come and terminate them as long as they're labeled where they're coming from and where they're going. We've got enough space back there to put the equipment in. So it might be something to move forward on now if we have a little extra money in the budget.
Let me say that I brought this issue up in May or June, and it didn't get a lot of reception. So I'm glad it's getting some reception now. I did say the same thing about a counter. In fact, my exact quote was, I'm 60 years old, and now I'm 61 years old, and I still can leave the counter. It's too low, it's a danger, and I mentioned it, and yet people came through and said, no, we don't need it. We do need it, okay? And no sooner than I said that the town of Virginia Beach was shot up by a disgruntled former employee. And the same stuff that our citizens brought to us saying it would never happen here is exactly what they said to the news as they carted the bodies out. A couple weeks later, the city manager or city administrator in Indian Rocks was darn near run over by a disgruntled former employee, and it happened there. So that's the next town down. But let me throw a little bucket of cold water on this idea to the respect of audio equipping your cameras. If you do that, Florida Statute 934.03 says that you'll be committing a third-degree felony. You are not allowed to record audio in parking lots and in other common areas. So, there's certain limited times. If a person is having a conversation, if the mayor is making a speech in the parking lot, you can record that. But if I'm talking on my telephone to somebody or talking privately to someone, that is eavesdropping, and that is illegal under Florida law. So I would advise this council not even to discuss audio recording. The courts have been a little bit more understanding when there's no expectation of privacy, but I am telling you that someone coming from their car talking on their telephone that has their conversation intercepted is going to have, excuse me, a big problem with that, okay? And everyone connected with it is guilty of that felony. Everyone who touches the tape, everyone who disseminates it, it's all a problem, okay? And there's civil suits on top of the criminal penalties. So please do a favor and avoid any discussion of audio recording. Video recording is possible as long as you're keeping it in areas that people expect to be video recorded. So for example, the bathrooms, you can't video record someone, but you can record someone in the hallway, and we should. And we can record this, we can have this council chambers under constant surveillance, and we can have the outside of the parking lot under surveillance. And why stop there? Let's take a look at our other facilities. We have a marina, we have boats that are parked out there. Maybe we can tie that into that system. Make sure that the security for this building is top-notch. If we're going to talk about security, talk about all the security. We absolutely need some type of a barrier so that people can't leak that counter. They can be back there, and as you say, it takes 10 minutes for a response. Maybe it takes 5 minutes. The average active shooter takes 5 minutes to demolish a facility. So, and they do a lot of damage in that situation. It took the kid in California 45 seconds to kill 2 people the other day. So you don't need 5 minutes, and there's no sheriff in the world that's gonna get here in 45 seconds. Even if they were in the parking lot in the back, it would take longer than 45 seconds. So you can't fault them. We need to make sure we give at least a minimal amount of protection to the employees here. No, this isn't the Bronx, New York, and no, we don't have crack dealers roaming the street, but I agree with you, Marv. We've had incidents, anything can happen, okay? Another thing I will let people know, so that it makes it on the record, for anyone who thinks that these tapes will be accessible by anyone in the community, they are not subject to public records requests. So this is something that goes to the city manager and law enforcement to be used. You're gonna have a lot of tape or a lot of disc. You're gonna have to talk about storage for this, and who's gonna review this. So having all these cameras are wonderful, but if people aren't reviewing them, you know, you're just recording a lot of nothing. So something to consider. I'm totally in favor though of having a secure building absolutely for the benefit of the citizens and the employees.
I think any former discussion on this, there is a statute in Florida that allows you to have closed-door meetings on this. So when you're discussing security, it's not an open public meeting.
Correct, and I just discussed this with Fred in relation to tonight's meeting. The problem is we have to make sure we confine it to security plans only, but you're correct, we should not be discussing security plans. We had a previous discussion that was a point item put on by City Manager Reeves. It should not have been done in the sunshine. We were actually talking about panic button locations. Not a smart idea, folks, okay? The bad guys can access these tapes too. So we don't want to give away our security plans or our weaknesses. There's no reason to do that. So yes, that goes in the shade, security plans. Anything else, if we decide to spend $10,000 to buy cameras, that is not in the shade. But we don't have to say, here's what the plan is and here's how they operate. We don't have to disclose that. We shouldn't. So you're right, Marv.
No. Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
I was just going to make a recommendation because I think the city manager is going to review his revised objectives under goal 1 of the strategic plan, safety and health of the community. He's got some revised objectives there, and maybe we ought to broaden the scope of this and just add in a new objective to conduct a security survey, whether it's for just the city buildings and assets or the entire city. But, just go ahead and take a look at everything and come back with some recommendations rather than just focus on just one area. Let's look at it all.
Absolutely.
Well,
A security survey.
I think it's a good idea, and I'm glad nobody's here, you know, that can really spread this around, but I think we ought to bring it up in general terms, but not really label it as a security system or something like that, because it'll create a disturbance. And we can sit down with the sheriff's office and let them give us some good ideas and maybe recommendation based on their experience. I mean, that's what we need, and they're out there every day. I have a nephew that tells me some sad stories occasionally, and we need their input. We really do.
Sheriff, I have a question for you. Do you have someone in your department that does like a routine security, like in a situation like this in the city, would you come in and assess our, you know, the weaknesses, obviously confidentially, but let us know, you know, what the sheriff's recommendations are based on your observation of best practices?
I don't know anybody off the top of my head, but I can certainly reach out and try to find out who that is, and if you want me to send them an email or get in contact with them, just directly who to have them reach out to.
To the city manager, let him know, yeah, that's fine, and then he'll let us know. But if you have someone on staff, I mean, obviously you've seen what works, you've also seen what doesn't work. So if we don't want to, you know, sometimes securities, I've done many security for many buildings around the country. Security people will sell you the world, you know, they're going to tell you need everything, but you see what works, you see what's being defeated easily, you're seeing what people can bypass. So, you know, I think that input is invaluable if the city can get it. If you have someone who has, you may not even keep a statistic on it, but if you have someone, that would be.
Yeah, I'm certain that we do have somebody. The person that I knew that was in that position has since transferred, so I just have to find out who's in that position now to reach out.
If you could, in the next couple of weeks, we have our next council meeting for December 2nd, I believe, so anytime before then would be terrific.
I can draft the email tonight, and then hopefully somebody can reach out within this,
Or
by the end of
next
this
week
week.
is fine, that's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I just want to say, part of me is a little confused, you know, we have this first off, I'm totally for cameras, so that has nothing to do with this. It's more of a double advocate kind of thing. We have this finance committee to try to trim our budget. Marv, you're saying we have extra money to spend. That sounds like we're just sitting there. So I'm confused where all of a sudden that penny may came from. Second of all, our first meeting tonight was about extra safety that nobody seemed to support. Now we're saying cameras, and we were saying audio no longer. And then there's also an email from a prior city council member that couldn't be here about the first meeting saying that they don't want to spend money on extra security. So I guess this is all just contradictory. And like Joe said, I mean, you brought this up a long time ago and everybody was like, oh, okay, well, eventually if we have the money, now all of a sudden it's, let's go buy it. So I'm just confused why we just went from one spectrum to the other, and I'm just confused. I'm all for cameras, I'm cool with that.
Well,
But I don't know if it has something to do with the prior incident, and that's why all of a sudden it's another importance, and about, I guess, what happened in the parking lot based on the emails that I got. And I guess I'm just confused. Is the desire for the cameras to record those incidences between volatile groups in the city so we can point fingers and sue, or is this to actually protect the city from people that could potentially come in and hurt us? And I think that's where we need to get our priorities straight, because if it's about resident disputes, no, I don't think we need it for that. If it's because we are concerned that, well, hopefully we don't have a road resident gonna do something like that in Virginia, but I just want to make sure if we're gonna spend the $12,000, it's for the right reason, and that everybody's on board for the right reason and not because.
It is for the right reason.
Well, I agree, but it was for the right reason when Joe brought it up way in the beginning, and we didn't jump on it then, and that was right after the Virginia shooting, so why are we jumping on it now after an incident between residents and council?
I'm not sure what your point is in this whole conversation.
My point is-
It seems like a waste of time.
Well, a lot of our meetings are a waste of time, where people babble on, and I never complain, but I'm just saying, it's my turn to babble. I've been in how many meetings, and I haven't had a chance to babble, so darn it, I'm babbling.
You got the floor, Rona.
Thank you. So my whole point is that I just want to make sure everything's done for the right reasons, because it just seems that it's not. And I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just saying if we're going to spend money, let's do it wisely. Let's make sure the residents are okay with it, because an email specifically said they don't want to spend money for extra security. And nobody motioned this meeting earlier for extra security, and now we're talking about video cameras. So I'm just confused, that's all. That's all I'm saying. Thanks for letting me babble.
We've had, not getting into specific instances, we've had routine issues ongoing, Rob, and I agree with you 100%. Dead bodies didn't get a rise out of anyone, but I don't know what did this. I'm not going to question motives because that's against Robert's Rules of Order, but I smell the same stench that you do, and I just don't like the smell of it. But with that said, if that gets us security for the building, which is something I proposed back in May, I'm all for it, okay? Just take out the audio surveillance and have it. But if anybody thinks they're going to be watching videos of people in the parking lot, using it as bases for lawsuits, guess again, read your Florida rules, and you will find that this is not available to the public. So sorry to disappoint if any person might think that. That's not what this is going to be used for. It can be used for surveillance, as again, I question who's going to watch all this tape. We don't have a security person on board, and I don't think the city manager or any of his staff has hours and hours to watch tape, but it'll be available if something happens, and maybe we can find out some of the stuff, because there's a lot of things that have happened at this city hall that I'd like questions answered on in the past. We won't be able to know about the past, but we certainly will know for the future.
And one last thing about the babbling. While everybody else was babbling earlier, I was doing a lot of doodling. So just saying, I'm not the only one.
Well, the reason why I believe that nobody wanted to go forward with what the mayor suggested is anything pertaining to security should be held in closed door meeting if you're going to do anything, so that people really don't know what's going on.
Okay, it's
That's the primary reason.
Marv, let me just bring up something to you. I want to just cut in, and please continue though. Fred Riley and I had a 1-hour discussion today about whether this meeting should be in the shade or in the sunshine. And it was his determination that it should be kept in the sunshine and to avoid discussion of the security plan. I have several emails to him talking about whether this should go in the sunshine. And on the email that I wrote on the 5th, I think it was the 5th, when I wrote to Captain Liner, I also put on the bottom of that, on my copy to Fred Riley, said, find out if this needs to be in the sunshine or not. So if that was the reason we did this, that's a shame, because that was up for grabs, and anyone could have said, let's bring this in the sunshine. I was the only one who said, bring it in the sunshine, and I have to abide by what the city attorney says, and he said it didn't have to go in the sunshine. We were gonna sit here and discuss police deployment. I thought that should have been in the in the shade. That's my decision. That was not,
You know, from a few conversations I've had outside of city council about various things in the past, this is one thing you shouldn't really be opposed to.
So it's actually an exception, yeah, it is an exception.
And it just, too much has gone on to take a chance and start talking about this.
So are we in agreement that we're going to ask the city manager to undertake a complete security evaluation of
Yeah,
the city,
based-
city hall, where are we limiting it?
Based on real threat. I mean, we had a bunch of council members here tonight who seemed to have been able to separate the wheat from the chaff on this issue and kind of segregate it from the hot button agendas. So, yeah, I think the smart alternative is, let's task the city manager to conduct a real security survey and give us recommendations based on real threats rather than whatever the topic du jour is or whatever the complaint of the day is. Let's do a real assessment instead of just jump into, hey, we need this or we need that, let's spend more money. And Robin's right on the nail head here is, yeah, we're asking the finance committee, but what we're asking them is, let's spend money on the right things the right way. Let's not just jump to certain things, let's base it on real data or solid recommendations.
Well, if it wasn't for me witnessing an issue here that could have gotten quite worse if two of us went around, I would sure want to move forward. I did, but it was, kind of knocked down. But whatever the reason, whatever brought it to the surface, I think it's something we should definitely move forward on. And Robin, my answer to you was, Lynn found the money. But it was his staff that saved the money. So, yeah, we have a little bit extra.
Well, we
Sure,
don't.
We have a little bit extra, I'd say a lot.
We don't. Our capital budget is set for next year, and we're going to stay within our budget. So the fact that we added money back to the piggy bank adds to the reserve. It doesn't allow us to go out and spend. So, I mean, this money is not in the budget, period. Now,
I know, we
you know.
pulled it out.
Right, so we don't have it, and we pulled out a lot of other things, we pulled out park improvements, we pulled out a bunch of stuff. So if we're gonna have a discussion about changing the budget, that's a whole different topic, okay? So I didn't approve the budget, I didn't vote for it to begin with, and I doubt that I'm gonna vote for a bigger one, so, but we can talk about it. So, anyway, we do have to figure out a way to pay for it. That was the thing that we set down with the festival. So let's figure out a way to pay for this if we're going to do it. That comes into the consideration.
Like I said earlier, if we do baby steps
Mhm.
and kind of plan the attack, and if we can run wires within the building based on someone helping us with a little design criteria, maybe some of this stuff is a little easier to handle than we think.
Absolutely, if you have the covered liability, well, sure. Okay, any other discussion on that? So do we need to do this as a resolution, or can we just do this as a consensus? We're not actually able to make a decision on this thing, so what are we doing?
Well, we have to,
We have to do it at
again,
council.
this is security, so we have to watch how to keep it out of the advertisement. So I think we need a little council conferring with this if we're gonna do that, based on state statute.
Do we have consensus that this is what we want to do, and we just ask him to do it? I mean, he's not spending, will this cost you money to do, Mr. Reeves? You're shaking your head no. So, if he's just going to evaluate it, I mean, we don't have to, if we want to formally charge him to do that, then we have to do it via resolution. If we want to just ask via consensus here, we are asking him to do it, just like we asked him to do it with all the other
If
fixes.
we're going to move forward with this, fine, he comes up with an answer. If it looks like we want to do this, then we better be very careful if we're going to do this in a manner that the state tells us to do it.
Well, I agree. Okay, if you're gonna put something in the shade, you don't advertise it to the community.
Exactly.
Okay, so when I said put this in the shade and then I saw this go out, you could imagine my horror. And I called up Fred Riley at, I think, Saturday night and said, did you tell anyone it was okay? He said, no, but it went out anyway. So I could lead you to water, as they say, I can't make you drink. I'm not gonna run the city, okay? It's that simple. It's a security issue. It can be kept in the shade in certain circumstances. Security plans should not and do not have to be revealed. There's Florida law on that, okay? Other stuff has to be. If we're gonna spend this money, we have to do it. But we don't have to lay out our blueprint for security and say, the panic button's underneath the desk. We don't have to say that, okay? So we shouldn't. And when I say something should be in the shade, then get the city attorney's conclusive decision before you advertise it. You don't advertise it and then try and put it in the shade. It was just mind-boggling to me. Just mind-boggling.
It's about the only thing we can put in the shade.
That's it. Yeah, very few. And this is something that should go in the shade.
I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Let's task the city manager to do a security study.
Yep.
Once we have that, let's decide where we want to go.
And that can be done for free by any security company that's willing to sell equipment. Am I right? So make some phone calls and get some quotes, and they'll draw a plan up for you for nothing. And then from there, we can have a shade meeting.
Correct. Okay, so we have consensus. Anybody object to that? I hear no objections. Mr. Reeves, you clear with what we're asking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Hansick.
John Hansick, 103 22nd Street. Okay, so we've been talking about spending money on a security system. You have already stated, we know, we have an approved budget. I'm hearing from this Diaz, I'm watching that point of order stuff, we have extra money in the budget. So I guess the question is, how are you going to pay for it if you take it forward in this fiscal year?
It won't be this fiscal year.
I didn't think it could
Different
be.
one. Yeah, or you'll have to cut a different project, and that's going to need the whole council's approval.
Mayor, just to clear that up, you can amend any current budget. The city council can amend the budget and take other money out of the reserves and put it into the budget if you so desire. So, yes, you can do that.
Well, I understand that can be done, but, we're trying to avoid robbing the piggy bank. And I know, based on the last council meeting, you were 13–14% below budget.
Right.
But that doesn't give, in my opinion, the city larceny to,
We're getting
Take
way
that
ahead of
money.
ourselves here. Let's get the survey, see what it says, what the costs are, what the threats are, and what the priorities are.
I understand that, but it brings back to my mind, we're talking about this and a cost factor, but I'm hearing about a wastewater fee, but nothing has officially come out so I know this isn't a topic, but I'm trying to figure out where we're at. And I understand you can amend the budget. We've had to do that in my experience elsewhere too. But I keep hearing, I'm not getting off the point, but council keeps talking about a wastewater fee. Cat's not completely out of the bag yet. And I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. So, anyway, I understand what has been explained. You can amend the budget. So, I just raised the question.
It's just being raised at this point. It can be for future years. And yes, you can amend the budget, but doesn't mean we're going to, doesn't mean I'm gonna vote for it, that's for certain. Not when we got flooding streets, I don't know if my security of a parking lot is tops on my priority when I'm looking at flooding streets. Now, if you're telling me security of the employees inside, that's a different story, so talk to us. Let's get the numbers. Mr. Reeves, how long do you think something like this is going to take?
Well, I'll have to call a couple companies, and I don't think you're gonna get much done next week.
Probably not.
The holidays.
Could we break it down for like inside the building versus outside? Like inside would be this much, outside would also be this much, so
Yeah.
we could choose
I have
to
a
be in
price.
versus out.
I had a price for inside, it was like $16,000. It was in the budget, and it was taken out.
The main priority,
Can I just interject for a minute? Because this is not what we think. It's back to hire an expert to tell us what we need to do to secure, to provide security for our employees, number one. And, I mean, that's priority. That's why we brought this up before, Lynn.
Yeah,
Then, you know, and then if we have ancillary services where we're monitoring the parking lot, that's fine, but that's not the priority. It's making sure our employees are safe.
Right, and that's, I had the security firm come in, and they walked around the building and made suggestions and gave us a price. And it was 16, but that wasn't even outside, that was just interior.
How long was that quote good for? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, it's probably out of date, I'm sure it was probably 60 or 90 days. I mean, I'm sure it's out of date, but that doesn't mean I can't call back and say updated.
So back to my question, Mr. Reeves, how long it's gonna take? We know next week's the holiday, so probably we're talking about you getting into this project in December, we also have holidays there, so we might be talking about this at the January meeting if all is well, or maybe the December work session if we have one. Sound right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think Patty could even inject a little information. We had an incident a number of years ago at a wedding, and that kind of scared everybody. And, you know, the two incidents here, I mean, how many do you have to have before the panic button?
I don't know, we've had multiple council meetings and didn't get a shake today, so let's move on. Discussion of best practices, number 4, requested by Vice Mayor Gunn regarding the consent agenda. Vice Mayor?
I'm actually going to hit on a couple others as well. First of all, discussion items on the work session agenda. The constraint we put on actual items was basically for regular
Yes.
council sessions.
Correct.
So I just want to,
Yes. This is where they belong.
yeah, so you mentioned that, but this is,
No, I said I put it incorrectly on the other one, that was my bad, I forgot that, I forgot, we changed that motion so much, and I forgot that was there, so I accidentally put 2 of them on the last one, and that's why I moved it to here, so, nope, this is exactly where they belong,
we're all
discussion.
good to go here.
Absolutely.
Consent agenda, added after the last council elections to streamline business. The intended protocol, place routine administrative business in the consent agenda. Individual items can be removed from the consent agenda and moved to the regular agenda at the discretion of council members for Q&A or further discussion. It's basically a time-saving tool and a management by exception kind of tool. So where we had that long list of approval of minutes, could have rolled in there, and if there were specific examples we wanted to pull, so I just want to refresh all of our minds on all that stuff. Committee boards and charters, we've kind of gone through some of that stuff. I provided feedback, I floated the balloon out there because I felt it was important to give these people some initial direction and guidance and what the expectations were, rather than just say, hey, go out there and look at our financial process and come back to us and give us what you think we need to do. So that's it. And it engendered some discussion here, and I think that was good. I've got certainly no problems with that.
Glenn, the only point on the consent agenda, and in the beginning I was a little shaky with those, and I've gotten to understand it much better. We took the minutes out of them, and we did last time we had a whole bunch because we had a whole bunch because they had to be redone and everything because of some concerns. normally, we were having issues with the minutes, particularly when they were in more detail, where we were always pulling them out, and they were always going to discussion, and I was looking over at you, and you weren't too thrilled about it, but I was always the one making the motion to pull them out, or at least asking for a motion to pull them out. So that's why they were out. Typically, they can go in, but that means if there's even one change in them, my understanding is consent agenda isn't to be debated. So I would say last time it was a special one because we had so darn many of them. I think now we'll have one or two, and it won't be a real big deal. My only concern with the consent agenda is that everyone understand that it's not open for discussion. I know there was a question on the other side here, and I'm not sure who made it, but somebody said you missed an item. I didn't miss an item. There's somebody, I think, it sounds like somebody wanted to discuss the auction of some city property and stuff. If you want to do that, you got to pull it out of the consent agenda, and then we can discuss it. But if not, this is stuff that was just, it's ministerial. That's really all it should be, is ministerial items.
And so the corollary of that is, the onus is on you to look at the background information for those consent agenda items. Because if you don't catch something, and hey, I'll raise my hand, I've been there too. Something comes up on the consent agenda, something goes over my head, yeah, approve it.
It's done.
It's done and gone. So, that's all I got to say on the consent agendas.
Anybody else have anything on agendas, consent agendas? Anything outside? Okay. Last one is...
Can I get a couple
Sure.
more? Metrics. This is something I worked with the city manager on. There's been a lot of changing dynamics of the city, code compliance, budget process, capital improvement planning. The question is, how do we know if we're getting better, and or do we need to make corrections to whatever we've changed? So we measure things. An example is a thermostat or the speedometer in your car. It's telling you, hey, it's too hot, you need to turn the temperature down, or it's monitoring the temperature all the time and makes those adjustments. So it's providing a feedback loop. If you can't measure it, you can't control it, and you certainly can't manage it. So the first big change we made was in code compliance. We held the enforcement review committee. There's been some changes. Just recently, we went ahead and changed the staffing. We've outsourced some things and changed the budget structure because of that. So a couple measures, we need a couple of measures right now to tell us if that staffing and outsourcing change are paying dividends for us and moving compliance in the right direction. That was raised by Ms. Shirley here, and it's great because as we acknowledge, hey, we're trying this out for a year. Well, a year from now, do we want to continue doing that, or do we want to go back to the old way? So we need to measure it and figure out whether or not we're doing the right thing. So what you're seeing here is a first draft. Actually, there's a couple drafts, but I've discussed it as of this afternoon with the city manager. Basically, trying to automate his tracking log so that, as you can see, most of the data that's in this thing is already being tracked. The code people maintain a tracking log, and the only thing that's been added in here is a closing date for that particular line item. Everything else is automated so that it cranks out all the statistics at the top. So we need to just figure out what are those one or two items that we want to monitor that's going to tell us that code compliance is getting better. And we can do this on a rolling 30-day basis, we can do it on whatever basis we want, but it gives us the ability to sort and filter the tracking data to tell us what specific areas we want to look in. Maybe there's a certain area of the city that seems to be a problem area, there seems to be a particular issue that keeps cropping up. I don't know. Are we getting better in handling and closing of the cases? What's the average number of days it takes to close? How many cases do we have open at any one time? So there's some notes at the bottom. The goal is not to increase the workload, but to give us a better tool for which we can focus our efforts and make smart business decisions on this stuff. So take a look at this thing, and if you have some inputs, certainly give it back to myself or the city manager. Otherwise, we're going to try to move forward. I'm going to have some discussions with Deputy Doherty and continue to work with Laura and the city manager to try to improve this thing. And of course, this is just kind of a leaping off point for what are those other processes that we want to measure in the city. Obviously, the financial and budget is going to be one thing. What are those couple of things that we really want to keep our finger on the pulse of that process to know, hey, we're getting better or we're getting worse. Hey, maybe our expenditures do go up, but are we getting more bang for the buck out of that? So, to make some good business decisions.
Hey Glenn, the thing I think you need to ask him when you talk to him, if that's what you're going to do, is what codes he feels that aren't strong enough for him to write a ticket. He has the knowledge of being on the police force, and he says, I can't write the ticket for this particular item because it's not strong enough, or there's wrong wording in it. And the other thing we have to do, this is an ongoing process. We haven't even got to the water side yet. We're close. And then there's an enormous amount of stuff that has to be done. And eventually it's going to level out. We're going to have hills and valleys with this for the next 2 to 3 years. And there's going to be some kickback on it, as there has been, because people said, well, I've done this for 20 years. I've had people talk to me at one of the events out here, and he said, I've been parking my boat on the street for the last 15 years, and nobody said anything. And I said, well, things have changed, and they haven't been watching it. He says, why now? What am I going to have to do, sell my boat? I didn't answer him, but these are the kind of things that are going to pop up. I think something we haven't really pushed is the height of the bushes from the lot line to the street. If you back out of your driveway and there's bushes that are between the properties, some are 4 or 5 foot high, and there's trees right on the curb. You go up and down 22nd Street, you can see it. Right around Louisa, you got a tree that's 6 or 7 foot high, right next to the curb. Well, that's supposed to be only, 2 foot high? So there's a lot of stuff, and I don't know if the people are ready for that change, but it's going to take quite a while to do it.
Look, we're not even tagging cars that are parked in the street overnight, so to talk about bushes are just, that's out of question right now. I mean,
We're getting into how the watch is made.
Right.
All I want to know is how do we tell the time?
I have a couple questions on your form if I can.
What are those things that tell us we're getting better?
Right. So the source, when you've got CP, what is that?
Which one?
When you've got under source, the column source.
Oh, that's, okay, their code in their existing spreadsheet is whether it's a case that's brought up to them by complaint, a C,
Okay.
or a P, proactive. They're in the truck driving around and they see that you parked under grass. So all this stuff is automated. If you put in a date, it closes, and judging by whether it's closed, they tell us whether it's, they're already tracking whether it comes in by a complaint or whether it's by proactive. And if you look at it, they're mostly brought in by your neighbors
Yeah,
ragging on you, right?
right.
So-
I know, I find that incredible. I would think that our code enforcement would tag a few more, but that's, again, where I don't think, we have enough presence, there's enough buy-in to do that. Or maybe, maybe it's just the approachability, but whatever,
Well, it's
maybe that's-
about measures, so it's
This'll
trying
measure
to
it, tell us.
understand why the numbers are that way. So when you see that, hey, we've got a lot more open cases this year than we did last year, you have to ask yourself, well, why? If you look at the number of days that a case is open, it's 60 days right now, and it was only 30 days last year. You gotta say, well, why is that? Maybe it's because the code is poorly written and the guy's having a hard time enforcing it or something. It's a tool to help us understand why some of those numbers are there.
Perfect.
And Joe, let me ask you this, would it be smart, or even could we ride around with the code enforcement officer maybe to ask questions of what he's doing and what he's looking at, based on what we know or what we think should be done, and maybe he can give us an answer of why or why not he's looking at certain things? I don't know, can we do that, Lynn?
Yeah, we can schedule that.
What do you think about it?
I mean, I don't mind, I think, I think there are things that are just blatantly obvious, and if those are tagged, the overgrown bushes and grass and things that are, if they're overgrown and trimmed, that's not offensive to me. If they're overgrown and out of control, that's a problem, and that's, I know it doesn't meet code, but if they're a foot taller than they should be, but they're trimmed nice, I don't have a problem with it. What's a hot button for me, it's gonna be obvious, or those cars that are parked in the road for days, that sort of thing. The barges that continually offload on Harrison in the middle of the night, it's like, the barge has been sitting there, it's not obvious, but when I went to bed, there was no lift on it. When I woke up, there's a lift on it, so clearly in the middle of the night, they're loading these barges, things like that, but hey, no code enforcement's gonna catch that, so I don't know if there's an answer to it.
Yeah, security cameras, that's where you put them. Because, that you're telling me this, I thought that problem was done, but we still got barges on offloading. They just do it at night now, and we can't catch them.
There's a lot of work done on Sundays, we think.
Yeah, that's changing though now, thanks to our new deputy. I like that, he's out there on the weekends.
So nobody's offering up
A solution, answer.
an answer that I'm looking for. How do you measure, or what's going to tell Jody Shirley that the code compliance process is getting better?
Well, I guess both of us are looking at similar things, and that's why I suggested maybe we ought to get out there and find out.
So every month you're going to drive around and then just make a subjective
I'll just
opinion?
go with him to see just what the process is and whether or not he feels our codes have any meat in them for him to go ahead and apply something.
Let me ask you this, do we have statistics from the past? I mean, I see a report that's put on my desk, but I don't see statistical measures.
There's no statistical.
Okay, so then we have to develop a past thing if we want to compare it against the future. But we could certainly look at what's being done now. I mean, and I think that would be told to us by our citizens, whether, like Jody's saying, we got people parking for 3 days on the street. That's unacceptable. I mean, that's not even a code issue, that's just a regular policing issue. But if people are parking, let's say 3 days, in their front lawn, that's a code issue, and that stuff should be caught. And I don't know how, if we don't have prior measurements, I don't know how you measure it.
You're right.
Yeah.
You could go back and put in the manpower to try to do the data entries for a year ago. Or what you could say is, hey, guess what? We start on 10/4/2019, start tracking it this way, and we're going to make a leap of faith here. We just evaluated every 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, and guess what? If the trend is ticking down on this stuff, we're going to make an assumption here that we're getting better without having to go back a year and just look at 10/4/2020. That's not, I'm not looking to increase our workload here. I'm just trying to give us a smart tool and minimize the effort required to give us the biggest bang for the buck. So, again, what are those things that kind of tell us we're getting better? Dave?
Probably you could use citizen complaints as one area that you could add to the metric. But, I mean, things are going to change. Even if you came up with a good formula, just because we're getting less complaints doesn't necessarily mean that the code enforcement is doing a stellar job. It could be that the citizens are stepping up and saying, all right, I can do better. I think it's going to be, this is another speeding issue. It's going to bounce back and forth. And I don't really see a good formula where you could gauge this perfectly.
And that's where we have to sit around and kind of interpret what we're seeing, because you're right, there are other dimensions to this code compliance thing. Hey, word's getting around that if you don't mow the grass on your empty lot, you're going to get abated on that stuff, right? Word on the street is, and the neighbors are spreading the word that, hey, these code compliance guys are driving around and they need business now. So, and part of it is, every once in a while, we educate the residents. These are changes to the codes, and we put out the word on some of this stuff. So, yeah, you're right.
There's a lot of variables. At the end of the day, we used to have a full-time code compliance person unemployed, and now we've cut that bill, what, half? Is that about what we're doing now? So if we go and we look at what our current violations are, and we also take into consideration the amount of complaints that are coming in. You keep a log whenever someone calls and files a complaint.
Right, and I think if you went back and looked at the reports over the last year, there was more Ps than Cs.
Right.
Because, that's right. And not taking anything away, the deputy's new at this. He's never been a code enforcement officer, so he's still learning. And he's got to learn our codes, because there's some things that he comes in and says, well, is this a code violation or not? You know, and we have to kind of look at what he's talking about and explain to him. But, you know, in time, he'll understand it. It just takes time. So, I think because we had the full-time person, it was more a proactive approach. Tell them before the neighbor calls on them, which was, you know, and I think it's a better solution. Instead of you have to turn in your neighbor.
I agree.
Yeah, it's never fun, because it's like, oh, the tool in the backyard next door is green, and I'm the only one that can see it.
Well, just curious, are we giving our new code enforcement officer directives? Like, okay, I'd like you to focus on this type of, I think it's a little overwhelming to say enforce our code.
No, he's been here since the middle of October, so about a month right now we're at, give or take a day or two. He's learning the situation. I had some discussions with the sheriff because there was some indication that we were spending a bunch of time making police reports. And I said, I'm not interested in police reports, I'm interested in code enforcement. And I've had that discussion with the sheriff, and we've got that rectified. So I think by the 1st of January, he should be on his feet, well versed pretty much on our codes, and we can move forward with it.
Another thing, Glenn, that you may consider is possibly we prioritize what's most important to the city, top to bottom, of this is something that's really bugging us. You know, let's make sure this is our top priority. What's next? What's next? And if we do that, well, the little things, they're just little things. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, if the council has some, as a group, has a consensus with some things they want as their top priority, you know, we've looked at, you know, as far as the city staff goes, short-term rentals are important. The grass, the Brazilian pepper, things of that nature. We've pretty much stopped the issue with having to go cut somebody's lot, because we tell them we're going to put them on an abatement schedule. And the first time they get a $200 bill for cutting a lot, guess what? We don't have to cut the grass anymore. So, you know, that would be a good tool to use if the council would come to us and say, hey, we would like you to enforce this. To Jody's point, the hedge thing, we have some people that call about hedges. So, I'm sorry, we got to go to your neighbor and tell you. Or if there's a house sale, as an example, this week there was a code assessment / it's a house sale, but we do a code violation. And if there's violations there that violate the code, we want to tell the new owner, because we don't want them to come in and say, oh, guess what? We're coming to tell you to take that down. As an example, we've got a house over here on Harbor Drive. There's some tide poles that are within 12 feet of the neighbor. The neighbor made a complaint about it some time ago, and we talked to the homeowner. His house has been for sale, so we put that in the code search, so. Now the new owner knows that, guess what? You gotta remove those topos, because they're within the 12 feet limit.
So we're in a work session, can we just rattle off a few of those things? I mean, I would think
Yeah.
that this
I
is
don't
as
have
good a
a-
time as any to talk about it, right? So, I mean, clearly, the short-term rentals, I think, is a hot button for everyone. And I know, I was recently on an Airbnb and saw 2 houses in our neighborhood that are listed on Airbnb. One of them's close to y'all's neighborhood, so, so that's something, I don't know who's checking those, if anyone in the city is handling that, Lynn, but that's something I would think we'd look at.
Well, a lot of times, just, you know, if a resident has those, I would say to any resident that knows about that or finds one or is next door to one, it's very important that they tell us, because a lot of times we can go to that home. As an example, we had one that we got a complaint on. We've been to that place 3 or 4 times. It's actually, I think it's on this report, and no one's been there.
Right.
So,
If they're not renting it, that's the one thing, when I saw these 2, they were both priced very high, and chances are they're probably not renting, but just to you know, to know that that's on there, it's kind of important probably. So anyway, just something to think about. Then I would also say another hot button is, I don't care where the construction site is, any house under construction, we need to drive by those. Whenever we have code enforcement officer here, that needs to be their first stop, because when you're a neighbor to those, our street, as you know, has been under construction for the last few years, it's very frustrating. So, you know, just out of courtesy for the surrounding neighbors, I think code enforcement should be on those construction sites. I mean, those would be, you know, on-street parking, I think it's hot, but I don't care if someone parks in the grass as much as the on-street parking bothers me. It's often very difficult to get out of my driveway because someone's parked behind the driveway.
How long's it been since we did the last one, code enforcement review? When was that?
Just
last
finished
fall.
it.
Last fall.
Last fall. So I mean, we're getting into the fall, it's been a year.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time, I mean, one of the spin-offs was, hey, you know, we need to come back and check on how that went, and maybe prioritizing some of these infractions should be something we pitch at the code enforcement committee. Review how it's gone, do we need to retweak anything? Give us a priority of these codes.
I would think
They're the
more of
residents.
prioritization rather than a complete code review,
Yes,
because
no, I agree.
that was painful for everyone involved. A lot of time and effort went into that, and grateful it happened, but
They do it by exception, not just go through the whole thing, but
Right.
what do we know isn't working? We still haven't plugged that hole, there's still a loophole here, or it's not working like we had envisioned it. Plug the hole, prioritize what we need to.
Well, that's when we need the input from the sheriff's department. Or our gal in the office says, all right, what did you see over last year that didn't work? What do we need to improve on? What do we need to change? Not all of them, because we made a lot of changes, and it looks like many of them are working. But maybe each one of us, since we live all over the city, ought to just go around and say, hey, what are our pet peeves? What really bothers us? What are we seeing out there that needs to be addressed? And maybe there's not a code for it. Who knows? Or maybe the code can't be gone over, or the code enforcement person hasn't been on long enough to even think about what we're thinking about. So I'll try to meet with them whenever Lynn can set it up, and we'll see where we're going. Maybe somebody else can do the same thing, so we can get a better handle on whatever.
I'd like to make a suggestion. Jimmy's got a pretty good idea about, let's discuss what's some of the hot topics in our code that pet peeves, I guess you'd call them. Why don't we just jot down some, a short list and bring it back at the next meeting, and let's just have a quick discussion about it. And then we can hand that priority list over to Lynn, once everyone agrees. And there you go. Now we've got something that we can actually start looking at.
For the next work session.
Yeah, sure.
I agree, because I would really need to talk to a lot of the people in the community and hear their voice versus my pet peeve. I want to know what theirs are, so I've got to review it with a lot of people in the community before I bring in any priorities.
Yeah, Rita, you're in real estate, and you look at properties all the time. So what's your idea of a good-looking neighborhood, or what would you recommend, because you visualize properties in many different conditions? But
Professionally, I would.
what's your view of good-looking street?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question in a public meeting, and especially being a professional real estate agent, so I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer that for you.
I'm a licensed broker, and I can tell you, if the lawn's not mowed and the hedge and edged, it's a major, it devalues the neighborhood and the appearance. And people need to keep their grass trimmed, and they have to edge their lawn. To have grass grown over the curb is not acceptable, but it's not in our code anywhere that says they have to do that.
True. Well,
They have to
maybe we
edge
ought to
their-
maybe just
Not
rewrite
that
it.
not that they have to edge, but they can't let
They
it grow.
can't let it grow high.
They can't let it grow high. There's nothing that says about it edging, but we can do something about someone that the grass is growing into the curb.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll get back together, so we don't spend all night talking about grass and curbs here. I'm gonna say we'll just get back together for next work session with anybody's ideas, and we'll review them and see if we can't prioritize some of this. Of course, when we prioritize it, we kind of give a game plan to the people, but right now there's only one person in the audience, so maybe we'll save it to the end of the night. People go home. You kind of segued, Glenn, into general business because you went off your topic on 4, so I'm going to say we're in number 5 right now, which is general business. I had just one item, Glenn, for you, and I'll get off and turn it over to everyone else, and that is on this charter. The other one that we were talking about, we titled them charter, but this is the Planning and Zoning Board, and we have the due date of June 2020. Now, keeping in mind that what we asked the Planning and Zoning Board to do does have to go before the electorate. I think that's too much time for them. I don't think it will take that long for them to do this. I don't want them to sit on this project. I'm going to ask that maybe we consider making that as early as April or no later than May, giving us plenty. I really would like to see April. Okay, I just think it can be done quickly. I seriously could do this in an afternoon to pull up these deeds and stuff like that. It's not a hard job, so.
Regular session of the city council, the 1st of April?
I would like that, a consensus, I mean, whatever everyone else thinks, but June, we're just gonna get ourselves behind the 8 ball. We're trying to get this on the ballot.
You can report a delay during your monthly briefings.
And then we can decide whether we need to bring in supplemental help or, jump in. I mean, it's their advisory board, and if they can't get it done in time, then, we'll take the bull by the horns. But do we have consensus? I'm gonna say first April meeting, April council meeting. Okay, we do have consensus. That's it, that's my only change. That's my only general business. Anybody in any order? Anybody else? Any other items? Seeing shaking of heads.
I have one thing. There was a request sent to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office by a resident asking for something, active shooter. And that for the next council meeting, and that presentation is 35 to 40 minutes. And I just want to clarify with the whole council, is that something we want to do at a council meeting, or is it something better served at a work session? Or is it better served to ask for the active shooter training, which the mayor and I saw at UNC, and Patty, to try to schedule something for the residents, and if the council members want to come, then that's fine, but don't put it on a city council agenda.
I think number 3 is the right answer. You do it as a separate presentation, just like they did with the hurricane presentation.
Right.
If people want to come, I saw that. We got the abbreviated version, by the way, but it is very informative. It'll shake you, and it's really good. Very good presentation. So I think set it
So
as a
we
separate
won't
night.
put any, because the presentation started out as one thing and then it became that. So we won't put anything on the December agenda about a sheriff's presentation.
That might be a good for January after the holidays are over. Bring it.
Well, we'll try to schedule something with them and see
Another
what they
schedule.
can do it, and then we'll advertise.
I agree. Yeah, but I think that's a good one for the community. It's a nice public service thing, and people will learn a real lot. So we've all seen it, but a lot of us have seen it, but it's an eye-opener.
Just a little information, what I'm thinking is, if the sheriff could come in and kind of go over things with you guys that are working here, on what to do in case of.
Well,
I
let's
think
see.
that's more important to me.
All but two outside employees saw it anyway, so we can.
This applies to everyone, this presentation. I mean, no matter if you stay home and just go to the shopping mall or Publix once in a while, this applies to you. So I saw it. It was, I still think about it. It is a very good, it's an excellent presentation. The sheriff's deputy, or and I might be giving him the wrong rank, he might be higher than deputy level, but he does this routinely. This is his specialty, and he does a fabulous job. They have video, and he gave the Big C the abbreviated version. I will be here for the long version. It's that good, and it's worth seeing again. You can't know enough about this, and I mean, just last week we had another one, so this unfortunately is the sign of the times, and it just, for one thing I learned is checking exits, and I'm forever now checking exits every place I go, and I wasn't attuned to that as much as I should have been in the past. So it's a great presentation. It might save your life if you take it. So
Well, then, because there's not that many people in the office, I think Patty and your staff need some coaching from the sheriff, just in case something happens, what they can do in that office environment.
Yeah, we'll
protect
work
them.
that out with the sheriff internally, but I don't, they'll come, but we'll schedule something and then advertise it.
I agree. So try for January if we could. And, the sheriff's availability.
It may be, January may be better, because between now and,
There's a lot.
what do we got, Thanksgiving and then
Yeah.
3 weeks, and then it's Christmas.
To get a better turnout in January. Anybody else have any comments?
I have a
Yes.
question, if I may. Just reviewing some of the forms, documents, things that you handed me the other day when I was in your office. Do we have any outstanding lawsuits that we should be aware of? There's some things that just kind of triggered me on the attorney's invoice and on some of these public records requests, made me wonder.
No, there's no active lawsuits. There has been some question, there's a workman's comp thing, some employee. Like, we have not been served with any active lawsuit at this time. If that would happen, that would probably be a shame meeting if
You would. And I'll be the first to know, because I think I'm the one who's supposed to get served with the process. Me or you, one of us every now. So. Although anyone can get served with it technically, so if you get it.
if we get a letter in the mail, someone's putting on a notice about something, we just send it to the attorney. But we have no active cases. There is I will tell you, there is a mediation hearing for the workers' comp case. Eddie, do you remember the date?
December 9th.
Okay, yeah, it's in December, but we don't even attend that. We just slow it. Yes, League City takes care of that through the workers' comp.
And that's the former employee?
Yeah.
Okay. Now it is.
The city manager handed out some revised objectives there. I'll call your attention to number 2, page number 2, objective number 3, assistance with grant opportunities. I mean, we had some discussion with the financial committee here, and he's proactive in this. We're looking at going out and seeing if there's somebody out there who can pick up this task for us and come back with a list of grants that might apply to us, because they're not all applicable to municipalities. municipalities, we need somebody to give us some assistance and expertise. And you might also review the rest of these things to see if you agree with the priorities. That's it, stick a fork in there.
Anybody else? Motion to adjourn, anyone?
So,
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned December 2nd, right? The next meeting?